Hey guys, CDTV the G here, and the G today, of course, stands for get down, lay down, hit you with the Beretta, you better stay down, stray shots in the playground, living how I'm living with the lighter. And today, I'm gonna be reacting to the new and supposedly final album from Logic, titled No Pressure. I just hope that he goes out with a great final album on here. So, I guess by the end of it, I could say that this is an album that I have mixed feelings on. I guess it's just not clicking for me in a way that it has with so many other people. I'm very middle of the road on it. I did tweet out about this album. What is wrong with me? What was I on when I recorded that reaction? Or tweeted these tweets? Are you dumb, stupid, or dumb? Huh? Yes, I am holding the microphone now. I'm gonna test this out, see if it feels natural to me, see if I like it. This is the best video to try something new that might not work out on. A video that people have been waiting ages for, and one that's very long. So, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you may know that I scrapped my no pressure reaction. And yes, I'm unceremoniously ending the twin meme right there. It just makes things way less confusing, and this video wouldn't make sense if I kept it going, really. I am CDTV the G, as most of you know. That's it. That's the end of the twin meme. It had a fun run. It was pretty fun. Some people were convinced that actually was my twin, so I guess my sarcasm was convincing sometimes. But yeah, they're both me. They're both me. As I said in one of those tweets, I didn't scrap the reaction just because I thought the album was okay at best, and that's an unpopular opinion when it comes to No Pressure. I scrapped it because I felt like I didn't explain why I thought the album was just okay well enough. And I guess I couldn't explain why well enough because I was wrong. I have changed my mind about this album. Originally, this video was going to be me explaining why I felt the album was just okay. Now it's a review that displays that it is clearly growing on me. Now, if you couldn't tell already, this is gonna be kind of a long intro, but that's not an issue. YouTube has the chapters feature now. If you want to skip forward and just get into the review, you can do that because there's timestamps literally in the video time bar. People can't complain about long intros anymore. But I would highly recommend watching all of it because I want to give you guys context as to why I just thought the album was okay at first, and why the opinions that I voiced in those tweets don't align with my opinions now. One of the biggest factors was very simple. I recorded my No Pressure reaction when I was having a very bad and stressful day. I won't go into details, but I had a very difficult time recording it, and I was under a lot of time pressure to record it on the day that I did it, so that just made me feel anxious and kind of stopped me from fully connecting with the music because my mind was racing and on other things. That's admittedly one of the flaws of reaction videos. If you're doing it legitimately, you can only record them once, and sometimes they are influenced by you having a bad day. Luckily, I realized this pretty quickly after recording the reaction and decided to scrap it and not upload it. I would feel pretty disingenuous putting a reaction out there that was so strongly affected by the day I was having. It was not because people were on my ass on social media for not liking the album as much as them that kind of forced me to change my opinion, because I do not care if my opinions are popularly held ones or not. The only thing I care about is that the opinions I'm presenting in my videos do genuinely align with my opinions in real life. I genuinely just had a change of heart because things changed the more I listened to the album. I gave it more chances on days where I was feeling better, and it grew on me. So the question now is, how much did it grow on me? I no longer think it's just okay, but do I think it's good? Do I think it's great, or do I think it's nearly flawless? Will I still have a fair amount of criticism about this album, despite the fact that I do like it more now? And how much do I disagree with my original reaction? Well, let's answer those questions with a track-by-track review of No Pressure by Logic. This is CDTV Productions holding the microphone, And let's get right into it.
Hey, no pressure, never graduated, but I school him like professor. Growing up, the world always told me I was lesser.
I noticed right off the bat that we didn't really have any filler bars from Logic on here. This has got me curious for what the rest of the album is gonna hold. We've got a lot of promising signs on here, and I thought the track itself was really nice to set this up. And after all that dramatic build-up, we start with a track where I actually agree with my original opinion of the song. This was indeed a promising intro to No Pressure. It opens up with Thalia welcoming us to the No Pressure program, which gave me a nice nostalgic feeling, followed by some narration from Orson Welles, with Logic interjecting his vocals over it to make what Orson said way back in 1942 apply to this album. Then we get into his opening verse, and honestly, this was so refreshing to hear after Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Straight off the bat, Logic sounds more focused, more energetic even. It sounds like there's more life in his voice here. And as I mentioned in my initial reaction, it's a lot more focused lyrically than a lot of Logic's recent output. I'm not going to compare this much more to Confessions going throughout the tracks, but let me just say that this verse was lovely to hear after an album where Logic said, "I'm Sam I Am, I don't give a damn about lyrics." It's pretty reminiscent of Under Pressure, as you would expect, with Logic rapping from a similar perspective to that album, recounting his younger days and the environment he lived in. There's some slick wordplay sprinkled in throughout it, like this line, and this line, even if this one is pretty similar to bars Logic and other rappers have used before. It was a slick little one-liner piece of wordplay. Now, as you may know, I've been pretty critical of Logic recycling and reusing lyrics throughout his songs for the past few years, so you might expect me to point out and criticize the fact that some of the bars here are from his No Pressure freestyle, which dropped last year. But I don't think that's an issue at all here, because that freestyle was more of a preview of this album, a sort of teaser trailer, rather than some just straight up recycling. He uses lines from that freestyle on a few other songs here, but it's not an issue because it feels very planned out and purposeful in this instance. Some nice, simple boom bap production from No ID and Like of the group Puck Div, Logic giving us a recap of what his life was like before he came up in the rap game. It's the perfect opener to set the scene for his final album.
Saying it's my Jesus walks. I'm just saying, God, I need to talk. Too many kids in the community outlining chalk.
The production from Six on here was crazy. Not something that went super in depth, but then again, I don't even know if this song really needs to go super in depth. I enjoyed how it sounded. He sounded passionate about what he was saying. Just like with the previous song, that reaction is pretty much my thoughts now. We still haven't reached the point where I disagree with my initial reaction, but trust me, we are getting there. From a sound perspective, this is easily one of the catchiest and most memorable songs on the project. As Logic states later on in the album, there are only 5 songs on here that have hooks on them. But he made sure every song that has a hook on here counts, because the one for this song has been stuck in my head since I first listened to the album over a month ago now. There's something so soothing about Logic singing, even when the track has elements of darker subject matter like this one does. As I said in my reaction, the lyrics here aren't super in depth, but they're still impactful, with Logic touching on injustices in the world and calling on God for help. And it truly sounds like there's passion in his voice here, something that has been sorely missing from a lot of Logic's recent output. It was great to hear that back. From the very first lines on Logic's verse, it sounds like he just burst into the booth preaching. And oh my god, the production, especially during the outro of this track, is just... Somebody give Six a trophy for being so consistently great with his production across all of Logic's albums. A true king. Again, it's mostly positives here. However, the biggest complaint I have about this song is also technically related to the subject matter. It's not to do with the content of the song itself, and it's not that big of a complaint, but it's to do with the placement of a song with this type of subject matter within the album. This would be a lot more fitting towards the end of the album. I think it would be perfect as the second last track, with Logic talking about the dark issues going on in the world on here, transitioning very nicely into Obediently Yours. There's also a certain other song on here that I think would be a much more fitting track too, but we'll talk more about that when we get to that song. Also, I have to mention this line because I don't know anyone who says messages in rap ruin the art. Maybe I'm missing something, but that line seems to be creating an issue that doesn't really exist, just to make what Logic is saying on here sound even more impactful. Regardless of those two things though, I still love Hit My Line, and it has an insane amount of replay value. We are off to a pretty great start for No Pressure.
I live by the beat, I die by the beat since 1990. I live by the beat, I die by the beat like MPC Akai, who I named William after.
No matter what I've thought of Logic throughout his career, his flow has always been just disgusting. In the best way. The only thing that I would say with this song is it feels like the content didn't really kind of go anywhere, and I wasn't the biggest fan of the sound of this track. I just felt like it moved a little bit too slowly, the production for me personally. It's just not a sound that I like. Should I just start pretending that is my twin again? So that I can pretend it wasn't me that said this ludicrous shit? Strap in guys, because this middle section of reactions to the album is gonna be a bumpy ride. The only thing I still agree with there was my comment about Logic's flow always being utterly butterly smooth. The way he effortlessly picks up the speed of his rapping for a few words here, then drops it down smoothly for a few words, then picks it back up again, just sounds so incredible. I live by the beat, I die by the beat since 1990. I live by the beat, I die by the beat like MPC Akai. It's so catchy. It's so catchy. It's like his flow is fluidly switching gears without a hitch. As for the overall sound of this track, I must have been off the goop when I said this. And I wasn't the biggest fan of the sound of this track. I just felt like it moved a little bit too slowly, the production for me personally. It's just not a sound that I like. Yes, the production is eerie, which does give it a more low-key sound, and Logic's voice is more cool, calm, and collected on here. But those are both things that I find to be complementary to the track now. The beat being more toned down gives Logic's flow all the room that it needs to shine, and puts emphasis on the great wordplay on here, my favourite segment of lines being this.
And on that note, I keep it G like track 4, kicking the door by Notorious B.I.G. Don't believe me? Look that shit up,
I don't know why, but it took me so long to clock the punchline behind these bars on my initial reaction.
I promise you'll find the key to that punchline. Feel it just fine.
Okay, well, let's see what he said there. Bro, Logic's got me analysing the lines here. What was he saying? Oh, is the key of the beat for kicking the door G. I think that was cleverly worded. Damn it, Logic had a bar on here. That was a bar. Those lines really remind me of some young Sinatra level wordplay. Simple but smart and smooth in its execution. That's honestly how I would describe this track. It feels like a great mix of young Sinatra and Under Pressure era Logic. And that is a very nice combination. As a whole, GP4 was a very solid final entry into Logic's Growing Pains series, and also makes for the third great song on this album.
Cause it's what they want to do if they had the opportunity to, but too scared. That's why they live vicariously through you.
Celebration was a decent song, but not anything that I'm too crazy about. I did like the very triumphant sound that the instrumental had, but it's just nothing that struck me all that hard. Right now, I'm slowly cooling down on the album a little bit already with Growing Pains 4 and Celebration. For Celebration, I would say my first reaction of not really loving the song does actually still sum up how I feel about it. But the specific parts of it that I like even more now. Namely, that insanely feel-good instrumental and the energetic hook that goes along with it. I've always loved when Logic makes upbeat, celebratory songs, so I always smile from ear to ear every time I hear that triumphant chorus with those uplifting piano keys and that vocal sample on the beat. So, where do I feel like this track is lacking a little bit? For me, I feel like the verses don't pack a punch that matches the energy of the chorus and the production. Do you see my little bit of wordplay there? The verses don't pack a punch, because Silas references Call of Duty Zombies during his verse. That one was just off the dome. It just didn't give me that celebratory, on top of the world feeling that the parts of the track that I liked did give me. Also, I guess this is kind of nitpicky, but why are you rapping about the listener's girl being on your dick, Logic? You're married, with a kid now, and a lot of the tracks on here center around that fact. The beat and the chorus carry this song for me, although I do like how it starts to really introduce the biggest theme of the album, which is, you know, doing whatever makes you happiest, regardless of if others think it makes sense or not. It's not like Celebration is a bad song. I'm still gonna listen to it for the parts that I like. It's just that I feel it's missing a little bit of that punch that it should have.
Cause hip-hop rhymes taught me more than my moms did. Didn't drink till I was 25 cause I'm my mom's kid. All I knew was alcoholism.
The more that this album is going on, I'm starting to notice just some of the patterns in Logic's lyricism that I'm kind of tired of at this point coming back. Open Mic just didn't really grab my attention at all. Aquarius was my favourite part of this song, but I would prefer it without Open Mic before it personally. Bro, me from the past, did you hear verse 3 on Open Mic? Or verse 1? That shit was ridiculously good. Verse 1 was such a passionate verse, with Logic rapping about his love for hip-hop, and how he's gonna ensure that his son has a better, more loving upbringing than he did. And the third verse had some great lyrical references back to Under Pressure, while Logic is just consistently flowing and talking his shit. It's great. The second verse was just Logic recycling a chunk of the third verse from his OCD single that he dropped before this album, and I didn't like that at first, but I'm not too mad at it now, because he only used it for a very small portion of this song, and it contributes to that concept of this being Logic performing at an open mic night, mixing new lyrics with previously released ones. Not to mention, the lyrics of that verse perfectly apply to the fame not equaling happiness theme of No Pressure. So as long as there's really good context and reasoning for reusing lyrics, then it's not a big issue for me. On top of that, I don't know if it was the equipment he recorded the verses with, or the way his vocals were mixed, or both, but it genuinely sounds like Logic is performing on a handheld microphone at an open mic night on this song, which really helps immerse you in the atmosphere of it. Open mic has grown on me a lot, but even with that being said, Aquarius 3 is still my favourite part of this song. If there is one verse that sums up most of this album and the main theme of Logic finding his happiness through quitting rap to be a husband and a father, it's this one. Yes, I would say that Open Mic is stronger lyrically from a bar-focused perspective, but I just love how personal, open, and wholesome Aquarius 3 is. And of course, the beat on it is lovely too, so that's an added bonus. Taking this song as both parts, Open Mic and Aquarius 3, I definitely didn't show this enough love on my first listen.
Goddamn, conversations with people. Crazy how one day the legends forget that they equal on this Under Pressure sequel. We not.
That beat's already giving me nostalgia. Aww. He's not gonna go over the second soul food beat. That was my favorite part of the original song. I'm struggling to keep engaged with a lot of Logic's rapping on here. I don't know how I feel about that one. Yes, Logic is saying a lot. He's still flowing nicely. He's saying a lot of words, but none of those words are sticking with me. It makes me kind of sad to say it, but I can't see myself revisiting many of these tracks. Now, if I underrated Open Mic on my first listen of this album, then I straight up dismissed Soul Food 2. I do prefer the first one, and I maintain that the second beat on Soul Food 1 is still the best beat out of the two. But Logic does such a great job at showing the contrast in his mindset and his status in the rap game since the first one on this song, straight from this genius flip of the opening lines. Instead of idolizing rappers he looks up to as legends on this one, he simply refers to them as people on here, because at the end of the day, that's just what they are. This doesn't need to be better than the first Soul Food, because it works perfectly with that track to show Logic's growth as a person and an artist over the 6-year gap between the songs. Also, that turn a profit wordplay, they looking for change but I'm deep in the pocket, disgustingly smooth. As is the way that he closes out the first verse, where he basically says that the most humble way for him to say that he's the greatest lyricist ever is just to not say anything.
Greatest lyricist to ever do it, yeah, essentially. And if we're being modest, then potentially. And if we're being humble, then
I completely underrated how much of a return to form lyrically this album is for Logic. Then, after the great first verse on here, we have a beat switch, which transitions into a nice, quick verse that basically sums up the whole Thomas and Kai Paradise storyline that Logic has told throughout his studio albums, starting with the incredible true story. At first I thought it was kinda pointless for Logic to rap a summary for a story that he's already told us throughout his albums. But now I really enjoy the verse, and considering that it's his final album, I think it's fitting for him to give a recap of the story of his albums and give some closure to the story with one verse to sum it up. And with that in mind, this was the track that I was talking about earlier that I wish was the song following the No Pressure intro. Not only would it mirror Under Pressure, having both the Soul Food tracks as track 2, but I also think the final verse of this being the summary of the narrative of Logic's albums would perfectly lead into the rest of this album, considering it's his final one. It would basically give closure to that story immediately and put all of the focus on Logic and his career coming to an end from the start of the album. I also just feel like it would transition much more smoothly into the sound of GP4 than Hit My Line does. But again, that's my only real complaint here. I just wish it was placed differently in the track list. Oh, also, I don't know who Raquel is, but she's a thought apparently. Do with that information what you will.
you my sister, cousin, brother from the other side. The other side. I don't know who told you that. My mama. Where she fucking lied. Hey, wake up, wake up.
Was that supposed to be on Confessions of a Dangerous Mind or something? That type of sound came out of nowhere for this project. It is what it is. That was the song. As with the past few, I didn't really like this one on my initial reaction, and in a shocking twist of events, I still don't really like it now. This song just doesn't fit into No Pressure. It's interesting because this is the only song from this album that's charted on the Hot 100 as of making this video, but it's the only one on the album I would personally remove from the track list. Just imagine if Soul Food 2 was track 2 and then Perfect was removed from the track list. Then you would have Aquarius 3 perfectly transitioning into the tracks where Logic really dives into retiring to spend more time with his son. It would be perfect narratively. No pun intended. But this song just feels very out of place. To me, this almost sounds like it was meant to be on Confessions. The sound it has is very in line with the sound that the bangers on there had. It would be one of the better tracks on there, but here it's the weakest link. Now, Logic did say in an interview with Hard Knock TV that he used this song to have fun, but also speak on a message, with these lines at the end, using his platform to speak on police brutality. And I guess that could work in the sense that, like I said, this is the only song from this album that hit the Hot 100, and I can respect a move like that. But personally, I don't feel like the lines necessarily connected how Logic wanted them to. I barely even registered those lines the first few times that I listened to the track because them being on this song just completely dilutes them, and they're so fleeting that it doesn't really draw attention to the issue. It feels tacked on in a way that it wouldn't if the song was dedicated to the topic, or at least more in line with it. As it is, Perfect is the only certified skip on the album so far.
I said I'm happy the man I is, and I'm proud of the man I become. I'm proud that I'm from a slum and never got cold, I never got numb except for the...
Those horns are my favorite part of this song, honestly. That's hitting the most for me. But again, it's just the rapping, it's not doing anything for me. It's not clicking with me. The horns were hard on here, but that was like the highlight of the song for me. Here we can see that, once again, I have failed the vibe check. I mean, yeah, the horns are insanely hard on here, but the rapping is so smooth and has such a positive message about self-love too. I am so happy I did not publish my No Pressure reaction in full. This song is literally just Logic being happy with who he is, fully accepting himself, and shouting out people that he looks up to. How can you be mad at that? How could I be mad at that? I guess some of my initial reaction came from the fact that the rhyme schemes across this whole song will be Very familiar if you're a Logic fan like I am, but at least he has some nice content within those rhyme schemes. As you might be able to tell, this song utilizes the same sample as Indica Badu from Logic's Bobby Tarantino 2 project, but it's brought up to another level here with the jazzy elements added over the beat, like the aforementioned horns. This instrumental is simply beautiful. Seriously, listen to this in your room at night with some headphones on and it hits the spot, man. A lovely warm beat, Logic gliding over it, and I don't have much else to say about it other than it's very relaxing, feel good, and gets better with every single listen.
Cause back in my day it was food stamps, and I love my wife like I am Chance. I bet you rap about it.
Okay, so that was DadBod, and that was Logic rapping in a sort of satirical way, basically saying, oh, people want me to rap about my everyday life. Well, this is what everyday life is like now, being a dad. And I guess it is a kind of funny concept, but I mean, am I gonna listen to it again? I don't think so. This is how I know for a fact that I was in a full mood during my initial reaction. I hated this song the first time I heard it. I really don't think I was in the mood for a more humorous song that day. Because that's what this is. It's a pretty light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek song where Logic raps about life as a dad, showing his fans that rapping about his everyday life now would be a lot more boring than it used to be when he was younger and things were more eventful. And I think it was executed really nicely because this song is really entertaining and fun to listen to, but it's definitely a novel concept, and I don't think I could listen to a whole album of Logic rapping about everyday life as a dad. He made a very fun song about it, but he also made the point that he wanted to. Although, scratching your dick and dapping up fans when you mentioned that your drawers were stinking in the verse, during Corona times no less, what the hell, Logic? But other than that, there's some pretty funny lines on here, and just like on Soul Food 2, Logic has a flip of lines that he's previously used years ago, this time from the song Upgraded. And he flips it to show his improved mindset, showing that he isn't as concerned or overwhelmed with what people think about his work now, like he was back then. I really love those small references and touches throughout No Pressure. It really makes it rewarding to listen to as a Logic fan. Interestingly, I'd even say this song gives me a bit of a young Sinatra vibe, which is kind of ironic considering the song. Not with the content obviously, but that chilled out instrumental sounds like something that would fit right in with those tapes. Sprinkle a catchy hook on top of that, and you've got another pretty smooth track following Man I Is, just one with much more light-hearted content. Can you see how much my opinion has shifted since that first reaction? We are 9 tracks in now, and there's only one that I don't like, and one that's cool but I don't love it. That's a big change from for sure.
It's what you all been waiting for, ain't it? This no pressure shit kinda got us reacquainted. I'm happy you could join me in this universe I painted.
This one actually stood out to me as quite nice. The song really has a sense of finality to it, like this one really makes it feel like things are coming to an end for Logic's music career. Loved the instrumentals on both parts of this song, one of the best tracks on here for me so far. There we go, past me, you're back on track with your opinions now. Gold star from me to me. Like I said in my reaction, this is the point in the album where that feeling of finality starts to really set in. Whenever I listen to this album, I get to this song and it hits me that this really is Logic's final studio album, as the majority of the content here is him reflecting on his career and essentially preparing you for his upcoming farewell tracks on the album. When he said, "No ID my mentor, but it's time for the story's end," that shit hit me. And yet again, I'm reminded of young Sinatra Logic on this song. Tell me that it doesn't sound like something straight from that trilogy after the beat switch.
Motivated by paper and pussy, always been a passion. Whipping that Chevrolet Impala, my speakers blasting. Hungry like I'm fasting.
It is actually scary how much he sounds like his younger self there. In my opinion, he emulates the young Sinatra sound on this song better than he did on any song on Young Sinatra 4. Like I said when I was talking about GP4, I get a mix of Young Sinatra and Under Pressure vibes on this project, And that is so great. Before and after the beat switch, this track is brilliant. That first beat feels like it's just lifting my soul out of my body. And like I said, that second one just feels so reminiscent of Logic's Young Sinatra days. An absolute highlight on this album. 5 Hooks is just exceptional.
It's deeper than the surface. I'm searching for purpose. I'm tired of searching for logic and Google on purpose just to read that I'm worthless.
Dark Place is one of my favorites on here, man. This one hit. This was the most emotional song on here, the darkest song. This track really in its short verse packed an emotional punch. As is suggested by the title, this is the downright bleakest song on the project. This sounds like a song that Logic wrote just before coming to the decision to step away from rap. I don't know if it was, but that's very much the vibe it gives off, with lyrics about how the spotlight being on him can really make him overthink his songs, and him questioning if it's worth going through mental torment for his career. In atypical fashion for Logic, it doesn't even end on an upbeat peace, love and positivity note about how it's all gonna be okay and smiling through the pain. In quite a somber ending, he just sort of accepts the way he's feeling, saying that it's alright to feel like this sometimes, but he's in such a dark place on this song that he doesn't even sound sure if it is okay to feel like this.
But it's okay to be sad sometimes and tired of shit, I guess.
It's powerful stuff, and it's hard to really talk about this song without talking about what I do and the effects that this song has had on me. This is going to be kind of long, but I do think it's important to talk about my personal experiences with the song within my review. As you can tell, I discuss rap music on this channel, and a big part of that is criticizing the music. And I have criticized Logic a lot, especially over the past few years. But I do feel that I do so fairly. It's a double-edged sword, sort of, because as someone that produces content for the public to consume, you have to be prepared for people to criticize or dislike that content without taking it as an attack on you as a person. And if you aren't ready for that, you can choose to avoid that criticism. However, when you're an artist that's as well known as Logic, millions of people can criticize you, and I can understand how that would amplify things to a level that I can't even imagine, and it would be even harder to escape that criticism. My audience is minuscule compared to Logic's, and the pressure of putting content out there for people to see and overthinking it a lot does still get to me fairly often. So when you're at the level that he's at, it perfectly explains his feelings on this song. So all that is to say, I understand the side of the people criticizing his music, as long as they're doing it fairly and not straight up bullying the man, because that is out of line. But I completely sympathize with what Logic says on here about the stress associated with being a rapper and being in the public eye. And here's the crazy thing, this song has actually had a real world impact on me. You see, I check Twitter and my YouTube comments all the time to see people's thoughts on my music opinions and how they think I could improve my videos. And even though it's kind of obvious and I knew it already, it took me to listen to this song to realize the effects that constantly checking in on other people's thoughts on your work and opinions on what you put out there can have on you. Because of this song, and the themes throughout the album of doing whatever you want that makes you happy and not caring what other people think about it, I have been checking my YouTube comments a lot less. And of course I've stopped checking my notifications on Twitter as much, because that's not great either. And on top of that, I've just decided to make my videos however I want to and not consider it on anything else. That's probably why this video is like coming out a month and a half after the album did, because I wanted to make this video the way that I wanted to make it and put it out in a way that I would be happy with it. That's how I'm gonna have the most fun making it. It sounds like a minor thing, but it's not often that music straight up influences choices that I make in real life. So in that sense, even though this song doesn't end on a positive or motivational note, I still think it has a very important message about not killing yourself mentally just to be more successful, of cutting off things that are holding you back from truly being happy, and also that caring too much about what others think is a self-destructive mindset that you should try your best to avoid. There's nothing necessarily super complex about Dark Place, but it's presented so upfront and from the heart that it hits hard. Just an incredible song and an insight into the thoughts that would eventually lead to Logic retiring from rap.
Hey, me, I've been real, that's all I ever knew how to be. Fuck what you heard, I only write what I see. Second, I deploy, I never double use, X marks the spot.
Oh, A to Z was great, man. The beat during this song was just so gritty and hard hitting, and I loved the concept of the verse. Had just like this whole wordplay style of verse where he tied in, you know, the whole alphabet to it. I loved this one at first, and I still love it now. This one to me is a much better banger on the album than Perfect, because it still goes hard as hell, but it fits into the idea of the album better, with the song being framed as Logic teaching his son his ABCs. Now, the whole using the alphabet in order throughout a song as wordplay thing has been done before. It's not necessarily like this is a new concept. But this is probably my favourite song I've ever heard that does use the concept. First, you do have that context of Logic teaching his newborn son the alphabet, so there's purpose behind it. And there's just the fact that it absolutely bumps. The beat is hard, and Logic just executes this concept so smoothly. His flow is just so steady that none of the wordplay sounds forced. Switch the rhythm every track, flows I never double use. Like W's. Woo. Cool wordplay, a nice concept, a raw gritty beat. Absolutely no complaints here. And once the song finishes, we get to hear Logic play us a recording of a song he made way back in 2005. I think it was the first song that he ever recorded, which was a nice little touch and something that his fans can appreciate. It's a huge change from hearing him try so hard to rap back then. Like, he sounds like he looks like this kid when he was delivering that verse.
Never when the flip scripts, I'm more raw than imaginary rubber's brain in the gut of my talents.
To flowing and delivering his lyrics as effortlessly as he does now. Everyone has to start somewhere, and this just shows how far you can come if you chase your dream and work at consistently improving what you do.
My flaws I happily greet them, imperfections I love them, my enemies I defeat them. Man, I know somebody gon' relate to this.
As for Heard 'Em Say, that was the fourth good one in a row. I really enjoyed that as well. For me, it did feel very slightly like the song took a little bit to really get going, because on the first two verses he would pause and have the sample play, and then he would start rapping again for a couple lines, then pause and let the sample play, and then in the third and fourth verse it really got going. But regardless, that's just a small thing. I actually like the song itself as a whole quite a bit. As you can probably tell by now, the majority of me disagreeing with my reaction came from the middle segment of this album and my overall thoughts on it, because these last few reactions have been pretty on point to my feelings on these songs now. Heard 'Em Say is a moving and inspiring song, even if, as I said, it does feel like it takes a couple of verses to really feel like the song is gaining momentum. This is another one of those songs that represents the album as a whole pretty nicely. Logic sounds happy despite having struggles and flaws, he sounds impassioned, and he tries to inspire the listener by sharing his story. The entire fourth verse is honestly a perfect representation of this album. He's a grown man now, 30 years old with the son, and at this point, being a family man gives him more joy than success ever can. I don't think I'll listen to this track a crazy amount on its own, because while it doesn't ruin the song, I'm not the biggest fan of the sort of stop-start looping sound that the beat has to it. Even though the instruments on here and the sample are very nice, I'm just not the biggest fan of how they were arranged. But it still works great as a song within the context of the album, and it's definitely not something that I would label as a skip or anything. Still some pretty nice stuff. Then, at the very end of Heard 'Em Say, we hear Thalia say that this concludes the No Pressure program, and the next two songs are the Ultra 85 program. If you're a fan of Logic, you'll know that he teased Ultra 85 for a long time as its own album, but as No Pressure is now his retirement album, I guess he shortened what the message of Ultra 85 would have been into two songs that represent it pretty nicely. So, let's move into the last song that has Logic rapping on this album.
It's gonna be a better day, that's why I came here to say amen, amen, amen.
Kind of like Heard 'Em Say, it was Logic on his hopeful, motivational stuff again. The album is closing out with a nice stretch, and it's really having a sense of finality to it now. Having a sense of finality to it now was a bit of an understatement. This is literally his stepping down from the microphone, thanking his fans, saying goodbye, retirement song. The piano keys, the subtle choir vocals in the background, the synth, the drums and the sample during the hook. This beat spoke to my soul. And Logic again just sounds like he's preaching on this instrumental with an emphatic delivery and lyrics straight from the heart. It's a pretty straightforward track, but a very beautiful one as well. And Logic closes out the song with his final words spoken on the album. Now it's time to conclude the incredible true story and transformation. Salutations.
But surely my right to having more than enough is cancelled if I don't use that more to help those who have less. I owe the very...
Wow. Well, that was a powerful outro. And I like what this outro is doing. He's using the final track on his last album to shift people's focus towards big problems in the world. That was a phenomenal way to close out the album, honestly. This one was interesting, because rather than closing on a song that focused on Logic himself, or his career being over, or him retiring, he ended it with a broadcast from Orson Welles, just like the intro started with. This one being from 1946, about racism, the power of having a platform and using it to speak out on these issues, and systemic oppression that all almost applies perfectly to the world today. And I thought it was incredible. It is such a respectable move to end your final album, the last one you will ever release, with a track that isn't about you, but instead shifts the focus of the listener to wider societal issues and encourages them to fight for change and to keep fighting. Just a completely selfless move from Logic here. Also, the instrumental that played under the speech slapped as well, so bonus points for that. And there we have it. Ultra 85, if this is it in its entirety, was about him stepping down and using his last musical moments to put the spotlight on bigger societal issues. And with that, No Pressure comes to a close. So, that was a really big shift from thinking the album was okay at best. Like I said, I was having a bad day, but I do think it's fun to compare my thoughts then to my thoughts now and just see how different they are. There's only one track I really don't care for on here, and that's Perfect. Everything else on here ranges from good to amazing, and that is something that I have not been able to say about a Logic project in a very long time. And this is as a fan. To me, as a listener and fan of Logic since around 2014, this is the first Logic project that really felt like it had a super strong focus and a really great execution of its themes and ideas in around 3 years. It's his last album, and because of that, he had a lot to say, and it really felt like he had a true, solid vision for what he wanted this album to be. This is the best way he could have closed out his career, with an excellent return to form. Like I said during the review, this album had a genuine impact on me as a person, and because of that, it holds a special place in my heart now. The message of doing what makes you happy, regardless of what others think or say, isn't anything new, and it's not some revolutionary analysis of the human condition. But sometimes you just need an artist you're a fan of to really get that message across to you, to help you realize what you need to do. I think the reason this message hits so poignantly on this album is because Logic isn't just saying it to say it. It's 100% backed up by him making the enormous decision to quit making rap music, because that's a decision that's going to make him happy. It shows that even if something is a big risk, even if there's a lot of people out there that are gonna hate that decision and are really not gonna like the fact that you made it, that does not matter as long as you feel good about it. So I want to say thank you to Logic. It doesn't matter that I've not enjoyed all his albums. I've listened to his music for a significant period of time, and honestly I've had fun all throughout it. Even with the projects I didn't like, I got to discuss them on here and make videos that I really enjoyed making on them. So, what would I rate this album out of 10? My first listen, I wasn't a big fan. My second listen, I noted that I thought the album was around a 7.5 out of 10. My third listen, that increased to a 7.8 to 8 out of 10. And after many more listens for this review, I've decided that for me personally, No Pressure is an 8.4 out of 10. I wouldn't say it beats Under Pressure, and I don't think it's better than The Incredible True Story currently, but it doesn't have to be. It's still a great album, the best project Logic has dropped since 2015, and one that I would rank in the upper half of his discography. I'm gonna be playing this album to death throughout the rest of this year, and so there we go. You guys may have not got the No Pressure reaction, but I hope you enjoyed this very long review of it, and that it made up for it in some way. I know some of you guys wanted to see the reaction regardless, but hey, scrapping the reaction and reviewing the album like this is what I wanted to do. And following the advice Logic gave on this album, that's what I should do.
Hey, no pressure, never graduated, but I school 'em like professor. Growing up, the world always told me I